We're striving for two main goals, as I said: increasing government funding for celiac research and requiring the labeling of gluten on all food products.
We want to get gluten labeled as a major food allergen in the U.S., just like gluten is required to be labeled on all food labels in 87 other countries. We went to Europe, France, and the UK last summer, and it was so amazing because I was just eating without fear there. I knew it was safe to eat because gluten is required to be labeled on all packaged foods.
Welcome to the Don't Feed the Fear podcast, where we dive into the complex world of food allergy anxiety. I'm your host, Dr. Amanda Whitehouse, food allergy anxiety psychologist and food allergy mom. Whether you're dealing with allergies yourself or supporting someone who is, join us for an empathetic and informative journey toward food allergy calm and confidence. Welcome to Don't Feed the Fear. This September, we're going to start talking about something that I do in my work quite a bit, but I haven't talked about here on the podcast much, and that is working with individuals managing celiac. Of course, celiac is a form of food allergy and comes with many of the same implications for mental health and wellness. Later this month, on September 20th, if you're listening when this episode is new, I'll be speaking at the Wicked Gluten-Free Expo in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. And so I'm dedicating the month of September to celebrate that and to bring some celiac voices to the show, which I haven't touched on much yet. To start, I have invited on Jon and Jax Bari. They are a father and son duo who have become strong voices for celiac disease awareness and change, not just for their own family, but for the millions impacted by this condition. Jax's story highlights the challenges that kids with celiac face every day, and Jon's advocacy shows us what's possible when parents step forward to demand safer, more supportive environments. Together as a family, they have created Celiac Journey to fight for government funding, to find a cure and more treatment options, and to require that gluten be labeled as a top food allergen on all packaged food in the U.S. So I'm excited to have Jon and Jax here to kick off a month of exploring the social, emotional, and systemic challenges of living life with celiac and the resilience it takes to push for change. Jon and Jax, thank you so much for being here on the Don't Feed the Fear podcast. I can't wait for you to help me start talking about something that I've worked with for a long time, but I haven't covered in too much depth on the podcast yet, which is celiac.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Of course, I can't wait to hear all about you. Do you want to start just by telling me when you got your diagnosis and how you ended up getting involved in all of the advocacy that you've done since then?
Sure. So I'm Jax Bari. I'm 12 years old and I'm going into 7th grade. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my experience and my goal, eating without fear. I have celiac disease, which is a potentially life-threatening food allergy triggered by eating gluten, which is a protein found in wheat, barley, rye, and most oats. And I was diagnosed a little bit more than 6 years ago, right before kindergarten, when I wasn't growing. Then they did some blood tests and an endoscopy, and that revealed that I had celiac disease. So we like to say that as I learned to read, I started with fairy tales and food labels.
Got to get those down first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it began. I mean, we had no knowledge about celiac beforehand. We didn't have any familiarity with real food allergies. We were at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and my wife and I were seated with a psychologist who told us, Amanda, this is going to be really hard for you guys. And I looked at Leslie and kind of gave her a little bit of an eye roll privately between us. And I was thinking, how hard can this really be? And well, famous last words, Amanda. You know, it's been quite a journey, and our personalities are such that Leslie's mission initially was to get Jax on a gluten-free diet and to transition him and try and figure out how you navigate kindergarten like this.
So we started an Instagram account called glutenfreefinds_PA. And it started about just trying to help other new celiacs get information about gluten-free foods. And it was really to help the community. And then we started thinking about, like, what can we do to make the lives of celiacs easier? And we thought about gluten labeling. So we've been going to meetings, and since what was it, 2019 when we kind of started.
So Leslie and him took off on gluten-free finds, and it's been an amazing journey to build community and to find people who are similarly situated and trying to navigate, that gluten-filled world on a gluten-free diet. And from sporting events to school events to camp to religious school, you name it, it's food impacts every aspect of every day. And they've done this remarkable journey to really kind of share what their experience has been. And then I kicked in with, I come from a corporate strategy background, having been on the startup team of what's today Xfinity Internet, and looking at the why and the strategy behind this. And I couldn't figure out, why aren't there any other treatments other than a gluten-free diet? Why aren't there any medicines? And how long has this been going on for? And I kept getting an answer, well, we don't know. And I was like, who is the we? Like, is it the we at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the we at Penn Medicine, the who is this? And it turns out that, we identified that there's a dearth in federal funding for celiac research, that for many years it averaged around $3 million per year from the NIH, which is just nothing. And then the second part was, as Jax, alluded to, we identified that the voluntary labeling of gluten in the United States is just so much more difficult to manage celiac with. And we looked around the world and we said, wait, why is it so much easier when we travel to Europe?
So it kind of started with a congressional briefing.
It was January of 2020.
Yeah. On one side of me was Representative John Joyce, and on the other side of me was Representative Dwight Evans. And they said that they agree on nothing, but they agree on celiac. It is a bipartisan issue. It affects red, white, and blue. Just unfortunately, we haven't gotten any lawmaking done yet, but we hope to get it done soon.
Yeah. And I want to pause there because a lot of my audience manages food allergy only or other allergic diseases only, and may not fully understand celiac. And I think you said everyone agrees once they have all the information at hand, but everyone doesn't understand that gluten doesn't just equal wheat, right?
Yes.
So gluten is a protein found in wheat, barley, rye, and most oats. So it's not just the wheat, as you were saying. And unfortunately, sometimes there can be artificial or natural flavorings that can contain gluten, or other things that it's just like, we don't know because it's not specific enough on the food labels. So that's why we want gluten labeled, including barley, rye, and oats.
Right. I think that's important to distinguish.
It's this whole paradigm that if it's gluten-free, it is wheat-free. But if it's wheat-free, it doesn't mean that it's gluten-free. And therein lies one of the key challenges to try and navigate this. And you almost need like a PhD in labelology, if you will, to try and get through this and decipher it. And then that's on your end. And then try and explain that to grandparents or teachers or coaches or other parents. And we know, and we're sensitive to it, that if someone has a nut allergy, that we're going to make sure that this is nut-free, tree nut-free by ingredient, but also in preparation and handling and the like.
Imagine if you have a tree nut allergy and let's say almonds and pecans were required to be labeled, but not other tree nuts such as walnuts and cashews. That would create a massive food safety gap for those with a tree nut allergy that would need to be closed. But fortunately, that's not the case for those with a tree nut allergy. And we really hope that gluten can have the same safety net as tree nuts does.
It's really it's common sense. And I guess this really hit home for us when we traveled and we were coming home after a great vacation in Italy, and which it's remarkable how on the back of every menu they list the top 14 major or priority allergens, and that you can look through it and you can cross-reference. And when they tell you that they prevent cross-contact, they really mean what they say. And this is not these are not fancy restaurants. They're just your neighborhood restaurants that you probably, or at least we wouldn't necessarily trust in the United States, where they just say, "Oh yeah, we got this," but they really do, and it's cultural for them, and I think it flows from the regulatory side, but then it becomes part of the Italian food culture there. So we had this amazing trip there, and we're on the plane home, and they're serving ice cream, and Leslie and I look at each other, and we look at Jax, and we're bracing for that moment of disappointment. And so Jax said, "Well, can I eat this?" And Leslie takes a look at it, and Jax takes a look at it, and it's not marked gluten-free. And then I was like, "Wait a sec, where's this made?" And it was made in the United Kingdom. And I was like, we know that in the UK, gluten is required to be labeled. That's wheat, barley, rye, and oats in the UK. And there's no wheat, barley, rye, or oats on this. And I said, look, we have an 8-hour flight ahead of us. I certainly don't want you to get sick. But I also want you to realize this is everything we fight for here. And that it's so simple and straightforward. And he ate it. He enjoyed it. He was fine. And it reinforced for us that this is all doable here in the United States too.
So tell us where things are at now. Have there been any bills introduced?
So Jax filed a citizen petition with the FDA back in September of 2023. And it's petitioning the Secretary of HHS to issue rulemaking to require the labeling of all gluten grains in the United States. And that's based on Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act, FALCPA for short, from 2004, where Congress at the time, in a very bipartisan way, had given the Secretary of HHS the authority to label new food allergens that are not existing major food allergens. Gluten was originally required to be labeled in FALCPA when it was first introduced. And through some backroom negotiations from certain lobbying groups, we believe, they said that gluten is an intolerance, meaning a digestive response, and not an allergy, meaning it's not an immunological response. And it's wrong, wrong, wrong. Because yes, there are people who are intolerant to gluten, but for celiacs, it's an immunological response. It's a non-IgE mediated food allergy response. But the good news is that the Secretary of HHS has authority to add new allergens. The problem is, how many times have they done this, Jax?
They've used it once for carmine and cochineal, which are two food dyes. So, as my dad was saying, unfortunately, they haven't used it to label gluten, but
they have the power to do it.
Under 403W and 403X of FALCPA, the acting secretary of HHS does have the statutory authority, and they've used it once. Hopefully, the second time will be for gluten.
Right.
That's who you've been interacting with for multiple administrations now, right? So first of all, how do you just get invited to go talk to HHS? Like, because of the petition that he filed, or you have some connections, Jon? What's going on with that?
So, well, it's really Jax who navigates a lot of this. Jax got to know Giselle Fetterman, who is the wife of Senator John Fetterman, and he was the former lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. Jax was honored in front of the Pennsylvania State Senate back in 2021 after he appeared on World News Tonight with David Muir. And kind of fast forward on that, we got to know Giselle while Senator Fetterman was on the campaign trail. And she, like I said, she's a nutritionist, and she took to Jax's story.
Ms. Fetterman is actually the one who introduced me to President Biden. We were at an event where he spoke, and then there were a lot of people just going up for pictures, and he obviously thought that I just wanted a picture as well. But then I started talking to him, and I was telling him that gluten-free food is to celiacs as insulin is to diabetics. And I explained to him how hard it was to live with celiac disease when gluten isn't required to be labeled.
We left this night and I was like, do you have any idea what you just did?
And he then invited me to the White House to meet with the Domestic Policy Council.
That was a kind of funny question at the time.
He asked me for my phone number, and I was like, I don't have a phone, but I can give you my dad.
And so like Jax is off with him and I'm kind of standing back watching this. I couldn't fully hear what was going on. Yeah, it was pretty incredible that he talked food policy with the president.
It's amazing.
And so we did some work with the Biden administration, and he made his case to the Domestic Policy Council, as he said, and then Secretary Becerra invited him to come to the HHS Food as Medicine Summit.
So there were around 400 people there. I was the only kid in the room. I was invited because I had been meeting with the FDA, which is a part of the HHS. And then there was a panel where they were allowing questions from the audience, and I stood up and asked a question about what FDA Commissioner Califf was there, and HHS Assistant Secretary Levine was up there, along with other top leaders from the NIH, the CDC, and other parts of HHS. And I asked what Commissioner Califf thought about labeling gluten as a major food allergen in the US. And then, unfortunately, he just gave me this like nonsense answer, like gluten issues are rising and we will consider this in our future meetings. He was like, there are people on all sides of this issue. And I'm like, you're the only person on the other side of gluten labeling. Like, I haven't met a single other person who doesn't like it.
And well,
Good for you.
it really just it put an exclamation point on this apathy by the FDA, because we've identified 3 underlying biases, one of which is that a gluten-free diet is all that's needed when a gluten-free diet is all that's ever been available. And the second one is that the voluntary labeling of gluten is all that's needed when that's all that's ever been available. And the third one is something that's really so important, because the FDA had othered our consumer protection needs by minimizing the adverse health effects and saying that, yes, it's potentially life-threatening. You may get cancer. You may get diabetes. You may get other autoimmune diseases, but you're not going to go into anaphylactic shock. And, you know, that's just such a disconnect to us. And to me, I always push back and I say, look, when I was growing up, when I was playing soccer, you know, if you got hit in the head, unless you were unconscious or bleeding profusely, you got right back in the game. Today, we know to treat all head trauma seriously, regardless of whether you're knocked unconscious. So the idea that for a non-IgE mediated food allergy to be a function of whether it causes anaphylaxis or not is completely the wrong framework. And this is coming from the FDA. And so we're trying to change that. But it was really frustrating.
So there was one final speaker before lunch, and we were like, well, what's safe to eat here? It was buffet style, so I couldn't have anything that wasn't packaged or wrapped. But before you even get to buffet style, there was literally zero food allergen labeling. Nothing about gluten-free or even the top 9 allergens. Like, it's literally the Food is Medicine Summit. All I could have was a bag of chips.
And well, they had apples for you. Yeah. So everyone else gets to have turkey sandwiches and the like. But this is just like, we were also part of the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. And I remember, in solidarity with Jax, I had ordered a gluten-free meal. And I'm served vegan food. And there's nothing wrong with being a vegan, but they're not the same thing. And it's one of those real disconnects there. But So many people came up to Jax during the day, and this was 2024. So you're just almost 11 at the time. And I don't think he had a full understanding of the magnitude of this day. And so many people were like, you don't know how important what you just did was, because you put him on record and he gave a nonsense answer that just was a bunch of equivocation.
Secretary Alex Azar has celiac disease like me. And unfortunately, we didn't find out about that until later in his 4 years when COVID was happening. So it was very chaotic for him. But he said in his 4 years, no one had came to him about celiac disease or food allergies in general. So that just showed the lack of advocacy that was happening at the time. And he said that he absolutely would have labeled gluten under Falk, but if someone had come to him during his 4 years, he told me to never give up. And he said, just like Dr. Reimer, that the reason people go to work every day is because of people like me who are advocating and pushing for a cause.
Yeah. That must have stung though for the person who actually had the authority to do it.
Yeah. I mean, right.
It was busy. It was a busy time.
It was a crazy, chaotic time. And, the unfortunate part is that over the course of many years, history hasn't been kind to celiac disease, from research funding to food allergen labeling. And it's just been considered trivial. And look, I think that if you roll the clock back to the late 1990s and early 2000s, people trivialized peanut allergies. They trivialized other food allergies. And we've come such a far way, but it reminds us how far we have yet to travel on this journey. And for us, again, building community with having, like, from that very first time we were on Capitol Hill in January of 2020, we had kids on the Hill. We had kids telling their stories as part of the Celiac Journey Army. It was fantastic because you have in John Joyce, a physician and a staunch Trumper, and in Representative Dwight Evans, you have a staunch Democrat, and from different parts of Pennsylvania, but agreeing on the common sense issues that we need to take celiac disease more seriously. And to us, that was so heartening to be able to have that. And we learn from that each and every day. And like Jax was saying, this is red, white, blue, everything in between. Celiac knows no party. And we just kind of navigate the waters that we're in. We don't advocate for a party. We just advocate for celiac disease.
Right. Everybody can get behind keeping kids healthy. It's unfathomable that some people are dismissive. Like, that's okay. It's not anaphylaxis, so that's okay. Like, it's gut wrenching.
Literally and figuratively. And it's a hard journey, but it's what's been fantastic for us is the community, and not just within the celiac community, but across the food allergy community. Because the commonality here is, how do you prevent the immunological response? It's through allergen avoidance. And how do you have allergen avoidance? It's through reading labels.
So in March of 2024, FAIR, which I'm sure you know all about, Food Allergen Research and Education, they held a summit called Courage at Congress, and there were about 300 or 400 people there. And one of the main focuses was the Adina Act from Adina Togel, and she had gotten sick at her camp from taking a medicine that her parents believe should be gluten-free based on the ingredients, but unfortunately, gluten is not required to be labeled on medicine.
No allergens required to be labeled on medicine.
Not even the top 9 food allergens. So that's why Adina created the Adina Act, which is to require the labeling of the top 9 major food allergens and gluten on all medicine, over the counter, and prescription in the United States. And that would just create a safer space for so many people, whether it's celiac disease or other top 9 food allergies. And if you ask someone like who works at these companies and ask them why don't they, there's no reasoning behind it. It's just because they don't have to.
Companies do what they're required to do, and they'll take the path of least resistance and least liability. And it's shocking there. And we've had it where, Jax has 103 fever, and we're in CVS looking for Motrin or Tylenol that's labeled gluten-free, and not knowing what he can take and what he can't take. And it's frightening. It's a sad state that to the microgram, these companies know what's in every one of their products. Just tell us what's in the products. And so it was amazing meeting Adina and her family.
I got to meet so many amazing kids. I made so many friends over those 2 or 3 days. And whether it was a gluten allergy, a peanut allergy, an egg allergy, a dairy allergy, we were all there because of one thing, and that was food allergies. Everyone there was like united in a community.
And one of the things that we're really proud of that got us going a lot on some of our advocacy was the FASTER Act. And here it was, the Sesame community, first asked the Secretary of HHS to use their existing statutory authority to require the labeling of sesame. And when HHS and FDA failed to do that, they went the congressional route to force their hand. And, we were brothers in arms with them, because while we don't have a dog, in that fight, we do believe that, we can help them and that this is part of an overall community. So, to that end, we've been thrilled that with the response and the support of Jax's FDA citizen petition, that FAIR has backed this, Consumer Reports, the Consumer Federation of America, the University of Pennsylvania Law School, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Children's National Hospital in DC. And I can go on. And it's a who's who of people from the food allergy space, traditional food allergies, if you will, from the celiac space, National Celiac Association, Beyond Celiac, and then moms, fathers, you name it, grandparents, teachers, psychologists. And there are just so many amazing perspectives in here, because they understand the challenges both directly or indirectly through a family member or friend. And here's one of the interesting tidbits. I don't know if you know Dr. Virginia Stallings at all, but she's one of the world's foremost experts on food allergens. It turns out she's actually based at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and in charge of, she's the director of nutrition. And we got to know her because the FDA in 2021 had issued a document called Evaluating the Public Health Importance of Food Allergens Other Than the Major Food Allergens. And in that document, the FDA cited work by Dr. Stallings from the National Academies of Sciences, that basically they used her research to justify that they will only evaluate those food allergens that can cause anaphylaxis. And I said, and I was scratching my head. I was in my office, I think it was on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm trying to go through these documents and make heads or tails of it. This report is 500 plus pages that Dr. Stallings chaired and edited. And I was like, wait a sec. And I called her, and I think she thought I must have been nuts, right? And so when I get to work on Monday or Tuesday, and she's like, Jon, let me stop you right there. I think that gluten should be required to be labeled. I think that gluten is just as serious as IgE-mediated food allergies are with the majors. But the FDA funded my research back in 2016, and the FDA in my statement of task told me not to include celiac and not to include gluten. And I'm like, wow. Here's the twist to this. In 1985, the FDA issued a final rule, and in it, it said all gluten grains should be required to be declared on food labels. In 1985. And where are we today? 40 years after that fact? I feel that as a community, if we work more together and less in silos, that we can really be that more like Horton Hears a Who, where it's that combination of voices that we amplify each other. And that's why we supported the FASTER Act. That's why we support the ADINA Act. And we support other common sense solutions because we know our community will be better and safer for them.
Yeah. So tell everybody listening how they can do that.
So Jax has 2 accounts on social media, on Instagram. The first is Gluten Free Finds, and that's at glutenfreefinds_PA. And the second is at Celiac Journey. Our website, celiacjourney.com, includes lots of information on our different initiatives in terms of research we're doing with Penn Medicine, in terms of trying to find a tolerizing therapy for celiac disease. And we're doing that with Nobel laureate Dr. Drew Weissman. So it's this fantastic thing where Jax had to leave school early one day and miss a science class, but he got to introduce, the Nobel laureate studying celiac disease for Jax, and 729,000 kids like Jax. But on the citizen petition side, they can go to celiacjourney.com and they can find information. We want people in just the overall food allergy community to say this is common sense and this is for our brothers in arms here. And so that's what we're hoping for. And one of the things we'll be doing in the not too distant future is Jax is going to host an advocacy night just for children and their parents, but to explain how to get to a congressman, how to get to a congresswoman, how to get to a senator, and do that on a state or local level. Moms, get a lot of attention when they speak up. Dads are just below that, but kids, when they elevate their voices and share the pediatric perspective and say, I need help, please help me, it's an amazing call to action there.
Right. You're right. And I'm glad you said you're including parents because a lot of us don't know. I'm just learning and seeing behind the scenes. So the advocacy night, is it going to be a virtual event?
Yes.
I hope.
Yep, absolutely. And we also have a community night at Citizens Bank Park when the Phillies take on the Kansas City Royals. And we'll be doing that on Friday, September 12th. And we'll be celebrating Celiac Awareness Night, which is one day before International Celiac Awareness Day. So we'll be doing a whole bunch of different things. And if they follow us on Instagram, they'll be able to keep up on all those issues there. But it's also important to know that not only do we work on the federal side.
So we have an amazing state senator named Amanda Capoletti. She is so kind to us, and she's helped us so much. She is also the lead sponsor of Senate Bill 629, and that would be to require the labeling of gluten on all packaged foods in the state of Pennsylvania. So far, we have 12 co-sponsors, I believe.
And we're working to build that because in the absence of the federal government doing it, Pennsylvania is going to take the lead here to protect celiacs.
And then having one or more states having this with a patchwork system really pressures the FDA a lot more to require the labeling of gluten on a national level instead of on the state level.
That's great. We're going to put so many links in the notes for the show. So many people want to help, but it's so hard to know what to do. So yes, if we know who to reach out to, it's just good to give people really specific action steps.
I think what's so important here is that, it's kind of the coalition of the willing here, that to share that perspective, because while there have been different times in our journey here, I think that one of the most moving ones was when Jax got glutened in 2023, and that was the worst glutening.
I was pretty much living on the bathroom floor for 2 days. I was vomiting, having diarrhea, and it was really just like this out-of-body experience. And so that's just the short-term damage. Then there's the long-term damage where gluten damages my small intestine, and in the small intestine there are these finger-like projections called villi, and the villi absorb your nutrients. So I was diagnosed when I wasn't growing, and the reason I wasn't growing was because my villi just weren't absorbing any nutrients. They were completely blunted.
And for us, when we saw him on the floor for those 2.5 days, there was nothing we could do. And there's no medicine to take. And the only thing we could have done is to take him to a hospital to get an IV to be hydrated. And it's a horrible, horrible experience where you're powerless to help your child. So I think that reinforced to us, why we do what we do. But as we finish this, I think of your goal, eating without fear. And I hate to end on the note about getting so sick, but your spirit in life, which is what Mom and I, are so proud of.
I don't want to stop living life. I live life to the fullest. I love playing sports. I play soccer, tennis, and squash. I love skiing in the winter, swimming in the summer, going to overnight camp. You really can't let food allergies stop you.
All of us parents want every child to have that freedom and that safety that you're describing. It's so important.
Thank you. Thank you. It's this indomitable spirit that neither Leslie nor I had to worry about this when we were children. And to me, I think one of the greatest challenges is that loss of the carefree childhood, but that to balance it out with someone who will travel, who's not scared, and will face it head on, to us is it's an amazing way to navigate, and we're super proud of you, buddy.
Yeah, and I'm super grateful. Thank you so much, Jax. Every time I meet another young person like you, there's amazing adults out there. Like you said, Jon, people listen to some extent to moms and dads who share their stories, but I have met so many amazing kids who are learning how the system works. They're learning how to speak up and make change. And we're going to get as far as we can get you. But once you are all in charge, I can't even wait to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, Mom and I second that.
What's your final thought that you want to leave them with?
Anyone who wants to contact us, and they can do it through Celiac Journey or through Instagram, send us a direct message and become part of the Celiac Journey army. And we need children, we need their parents, we need them in different states. And we know that one person can spark change in others. We're honored that for the celiac community, that Jax can help carry that torch.
Well, thank you for doing it, Jax.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
I appreciate it so much. Thanks, Jon.
We're really grateful. It was wonderful talking to you.
I'm so grateful to Jon and Jax for joining me today and sharing both the personal and the systemic sides of celiac disease and their advocacy in this area. Their voices remind us that awareness is just the beginning and action is what makes lasting change. So here are 3 steps you can take after listening to follow up on our conversation today. Number 1, you can follow them at celiacjourney.com, and that's where you can find the details about all the initiatives and efforts that they talked about today on the show. You can follow them on social media at Celiac Journey, and then you can take step number 2, which is to support the efforts that they're working on. And number 3, just stay tuned. The rest of the month, I'm going to be talking about this topic. So if you are someone that you know and love, manages celiac, and you want to hear more conversation about it, I will be doing that with you all month. If you happen to be in the area or up for travel on September 20th, like I said, I will be in Fitchburg, Massachusetts at the Wicked Gluten-Free Expo, talking about the social and emotional impact of celiac. And I would love for you to join me there. Thanks for listening, and if you're finding the show helpful, I would appreciate it so much if you would give me a rating, leave a review, or share it with somebody else who might appreciate it. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have any questions about your own medical experience or mental health needs, please consult a professional. I'm Dr. Amanda Whitehouse. Thanks for joining me. And until we chat again, remember, don't feed fear.